Say hello and welcome back to another video. Today, what we're going to be discussing are the acts of Charles Darwin and other theorists that led to his creation of the theory of natural selection. So in this video, we're going to be talking about who Darwin was, what some of his findings were, and some other individuals that had sway over kind of his opinion on the whole matter. So, let's get started. Now remember, evolution is a theory, just like gravity. So evolution is a well-supported explanation of phenomena that have occurred throughout the natural world. So remember, a theory in science is a well-tested hypothesis, not just a guess. So there's evidence to support evolution. However, we can't 100% prove it. So, hence, it's a theory. Anyway, disclaimer, let's move on. So Charles Darwin was alive from the year of 1809 to 1882, and he sailed around the world from 1831 to 1836, and he ended up in spending a specific amount of time at this wonderful place known as the Galapagos Islands, where much of his findings went ahead and kind of had time to develop. So, he went around the world, came back to England, and what he saw in his travels inspired him to go ahead and create his theory of natural selection. So what Darwin's travels revealed was that the diversity of living species was far greater than anyone had previously known. And these observations helped him develop his theory of evolution. I mean, if you go ahead and take a look to the right here, these are all variations or different species of beetle. Now, granted, this does not go ahead and encompass all the varieties of beetle, but there's a significant amount of diversity here. Imagine seeing that for the first time, discovering all these unique species, and how many different variations there actually were. I can only imagine. So the diversity on the Galapagos Islands. What he found was that each island had its own type of tortoise, as well as finches, that were clearly different from other islands. And this made him think, why? So like we see here, the finches' beaks, each one was designed with a specific purpose. We have large, thick beaks for going ahead and eating fruit or crushing seeds, whereas we also had narrow, slender beaks that are used for eating things off the leaves, as well as grubs, and we even have a tool-using finch, which actually would go ahead and break off twigs and use them as kind of crowbars to pry grubs out of holes in trees. The point is, they're all finches, but they're all different. The same thing, tortoises. Look at that boy. So each island had a specific tortoise that had a unique shell to it. And all of this made him think, why is that the case? Why is there so much diversity here? Why is this tortoise different than this one? So a summary of Darwin's theory of natural selection. The first thing is that organisms differ, and variation is inherited. The second is that organisms produce more offspring than normally survive. 3. Organisms compete for resources. So organisms have to go ahead and compete with one another because the environment doesn't have enough resources to go ahead and make sure that everybody gets some. Number 4. Organisms with advantages survive to pass those advantages on to their children. Now, we already talked about this in the last section, but this is natural selection. Organisms that have the best fitness get to pass these traits on. And finally, species alive today are descended with modification from common ancestors. Now, there were various scientists and theorists that went ahead and actually had some influence on Darwin's creation of natural selection. The first one was a gentleman by the name of Lyell. Now, religion at that time stated that the Earth was around 6,000 years old. However, Lyell argued that the Earth has to be many millions of years because of the different layers of rock and how long it would take for each one to form. Also, the processes such as volcanoes and earthquakes are still shaping the Earth today. So each layer of rock is older than the one before that. The deeper you go, the older they get. So the Earth is still being shaped. It's still changing, and it's not the same as it used to be. The next individual was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and Lamarck had his theory of acquired characteristics. which stated that organisms acquired traits by using their bodies in new ways, or having certain things happen to them. And these new characteristics were then passed on to the offspring. So, for example, he says that maybe back in the day, giraffes had a very short neck, and over time, they kept stretching their neck out longer and longer. Kind of like a Disney theory of evolution, if you will. It's like, if you try really, really hard, you can evolve. Unfortunately, that's not quite the case. Case in point, if I went ahead and say I got into a tragic shark diving accident and lost my left arm. If I had a child after that point, the child would still have two arms. Just because I go ahead and lose one doesn't mean that the offspring would be missing one. Or if I had tattoos, the baby wouldn't come out fully decked out in ink. See, that stuff just doesn't quite work. Thomas Malthus, simply put, said that if the human population continued to grow unchecked, there would be insufficient living space and food for everyone. So organisms have to compete. Otherwise, overpopulation will gradually start thinning out the herds. The final one was another naturalist just like Darwin. His name was Alfred Wallace, and they were actually developing the same theory around the same time. So even though Darwin was afraid of the church's reaction to his book, he wanted to get credit for what he did. This led him to go ahead and release his book, The Origin of Species, in 1859, going ahead and sharing his knowledge with the world. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to go ahead and close up shop for today's section of notes. If you have any questions, make sure you go ahead and talk to your instructor. They'll point you on the right path. So, until next we meet, you go ahead, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.